Let's show you some quarterbacks that you could be looking to add off the waiver wire, not necessarily just as replacements for these guys, because obviously in 2 quarterback and super flex leagues, these guys are rostered. Derek Carr, 2 awesome performances to start the season as the Raiders are 2-0. Same thing with Teddy Bridgewater, 2 road wins for the Broncos as he's played well now 2 straight games. Sam Darnold, 2 strong performances as well, both of them over 22 fantasy points. Daniel Jones was actually the leader for a portion of the day yesterday from his performance on Thursday until Tom Brady passed him. Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes at the end of the day too, but Daniel Jones with his rushing ability looking good, and Taylor Heineke also giving some opportunities for some fantasy managers if you're looking for a quarterback replacement. Again, if you're going deeper than that, 2 quarterback super flex leagues, you can look at Jacob Eason, you could look at Jacoby Brissett, you could look at Davis Mills. Those guys certainly have an opportunity to help you as well. But Heath, of the guys on this list, who interests you the most?
Daniel Jones for this week against Atlanta. I actually, in early projections, have him as a top 12 quarterback. I do have to ask a question, though, because number 2 might be dependent on this answer. Does Teddy Bridgewater against the Jets count as a revenge game? Because they had him on the roster and they traded him for a 6th-round pick. He looked fantastic and really challenging down the field in the way we've not seen Bridgewater do very often. I don't think this Jets secondary is all that good. So Bridgewater would be right up there. And Carr might just be someone that needs to be rostered in all leagues and treated as a high-end number 2, low-end number 1 quarterback.
Yep, gets the Dolphins defense that I know they gave up 35 points, but Josh Allen, not the best fantasy day. We'll talk about Josh Allen and maybe a quarterback that you're concerned about coming up a little bit later in the show. Pete, welcome back. Let's get to the running back injuries here. And this one isn't significant yet, but it is one worth monitoring. And the big one there is Dalvin Cook. But Darrell Henderson might miss some time with the rib injury. And then you have all the 49ers are banged up. Elijah Mitchell hurt his shoulder, came back in the game. JaMychal Hasty left the game with an ankle injury. Trey Sermon, 1 carry, 1 concussion. He's in the concussion protocol. But Pete, let's start with the Vikings and Dalvin Cook. We saw him just tear apart the Arizona Cardinals, but he was in and out of the lineup and seemed to get banged up a little bit at the end of the game. We know his track record, and I know you're not necessarily giving fantasy advice here, but how much interest should fantasy managers have in Alexander Mattison?
Well, I'd take a look at him. I mean, obviously, with Dalvin Cook, this is one of those situations, and you saw him get hurt late in the game when J.J. Watt kind of rolled up on him when he made a tackle, and Dalvin Cook didn't look too happy about it, neither did his teammates, and I thought it was a legal tackle. But he did go back into the game, and that kind of tells you that it wasn't as bad as maybe they thought. So keep an eye on him throughout the week. I would expect he'd be able to play, but cover yourself. You know, Madison obviously is one of those guys. When he gets touches, he makes some plays, and whoever was running the ball yesterday was going to get a lot of carries and a lot of yards because the Cardinals defense was bad. So I think Cook will play. I don't think it's a serious ankle injury by the fact that he went back into the game. So I'd stick with him and make sure that keep an eye on it throughout the week.
Yeah, Madison is at 53% with his roster percentage, so somebody that you might want to just take a flyer on just in case, because we know this offense from Minnesota is certainly going to put up points. An injury that's probably a little bit more concerning for what could be a missed time situation is with the Rams. So, Heath, we saw Darrell Henderson get knocked out of the game with a rib injury. Sony Michel came in and did some nice things. Now, he's not necessarily available to the same level like some of these other guys that we're hoping for with backup running backs. His roster percentage 71%. But if Darrell Henderson does miss time, as the Rams have a tough matchup against the Buccaneers in Week 3, what's your interest level in Sony Michel?
Yeah, I think it's a different. I mean, he should be rostered everywhere, and he's not entirely. So that's the first part. But it's a different discussion whether it's a Week 3 discussion or it's going to be an extended absence. If it's a Week 3 discussion and it's Sony Michel as a guy that doesn't really catch passes against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I'm probably not that excited about having him in my lineup. The nice thing so far is they are just using one running back. Darrell Henderson got almost all of the touches before he got hurt. Sony Michel got all of them after he got hurt. There's not another running back on the Rams that has touched the football so far this year.
Yep, we'll see again. We don't know if Darrell Henderson is going to miss Week 3, but not a good sign when he has a rib injury. It's more of a pain tolerance thing than anything else. So hopefully Henderson will be out there to help the Rams and certainly help fantasy managers as well. Pete, the 49ers, we know the big story coming into the week was no Raheem Mostert. Elijah Mitchell was the guy in Week 1. He struggled a little bit in Week 2. JaMychal Hasty actually looked like the best running back for the 49ers. Trey Sermon finally got some NFL action, but it was 1 carry, 1 concussion as he was knocked out of the game on what looked to be a pretty dirty hit, to be honest with you. Talk about the 49ers running backs because they have Kerryon Johnson on their practice squad. They brought in Trenton Cannon off the scrap heap to help on special teams. Who do you think is going to be the best running back for San Francisco in Week 3 as they take on the Packers?
Well, who's going to be available? That's the question. I give Mitchell a lot of credit because he actually got hurt and came back in because they didn't have really anybody else, and he wasn't healthy all the way either. Cannon they pick up off the scrap heap, and he was the last healthy guy available. I don't know if Sermon will be able to play. That was a vicious hit. He clearly had a big blow to the head and he was down for a while. So I'd be shocked if he clears the concussion protocol this week, which means you're probably going to be left with Mitchell with the shoulder and Hasty if he can go, and keep an eye on Cannon. But they're going to have to pick up a back. I think they're going to have to find somebody for at least for this week, because you don't know where those guys are in terms of health. But again, whoever they put back there, it didn't happen on Sunday, but usually whoever they put back there, and they play the Packers next week, who have traditionally struggled against them to stop the run, will gain some yards. So just keep an eye on who's healthy and who's going to be the number one guy.
Remember when Dave laughed at you for picking up Kerryon Johnson?
Yep.
You're laughing now, right?
Oh, yeah. As soon as they name him the starter for this week, I'm going to try to trade him to one of you guys.
Is that the one that people should be picking up?
I
is it Trent
think
Cannon or is it JaMychal Hasty? Like, how are you approaching? Because Mitchell's and Sermon, their roster percentage is too high.
if Hasty was healthy, then Hasty would be the guy, because he's actually playing already. If it comes down to Kerryon Johnson or Trenton Cannon, I know Cannon plays special teams, so he's more likely to be active. I would think there's a better chance they're going to give 15 touches to Kerryon Johnson. Now, I don't know if he can handle 15 touches. He's got his injury problems of his own, but I would choose Johnson over Cannon.
Just a really, really strange scenario that could unfold, that Kerryon Johnson could be one of the fantasy heroes in week number 3 against the Packers. Let's show you some other guys that you could be looking at to pick up off the waiver wire. And again, guys like Tony Pollard, guys like Sony Michel, they're over 70% rostered, so they're not going to be somebody that we typically talk about, but if they are available in 10-team leagues, go get them. Zach Moss, 2 touchdowns in his return to his first action of the season after being inactive in week 1, so he scored twice against the Dolphins. J.D. McKissick, huge game, catching the ball against the Giants on Thursday night. We told you about Madison. We told you about Hasty. Darrell Williams is interesting just because of Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's fumble and struggle so far this season. And then Cordarrelle Patterson coming off a really strong game for the Falcons. Heath, of the guys on this list, again, who interests you the most here?
I mean, it's really dependent on health, but if you told me all the starters were healthy everywhere, it'd be Cordarrelle Patterson, because he's outplaying Mike Davis right now. They're still giving Davis more touches. They're still treating Davis like the starter, but I don't know how much longer it can go like this before they start giving more touches to Patterson.
And you trust him more in PPR than McKissick?
I don't know what to make of McKissick, because he didn't even have a catch in week 1. His role seems so dependent on what their individual game plan is a given week. I don't trust him to have the role he has last week at all. But if I had to start one this week, it would probably be McKissick. I think there's a better chance that Patterson could end up with 15 touches at some point.
Just amazing. Cordarrelle Patterson could be fantasy relevant in the year 2021. Let's go now to the wide receiver injuries. And Pete, we were watching the game unfold between the Raiders and the Steelers. There was just a meaningless play at the end of the game, and Deontay Johnson hurt his knee. So that's something we got to keep an eye on there. You got Jarvis Landry reportedly dealing now with a sprained MCL, so probably going to miss some time. And we know the Browns are down Odell Beckham. Potentially, we'll see if he's going to come back. Laviska Shenault dealing with a shoulder injury, and then the 2 Texans guys, not necessarily fantasy relevant, but could mean more targets for certainly Brandon Cooks, because he's the only guy at this point that should be catching passes for the Texans that we care about from a fantasy perspective. So, Pete, let's go back to that Pittsburgh situation. Deontay Johnson getting hurt. He's been so good over the last year plus. What would his absence potentially mean for guys like Juju Smith-Schuster, Chase Claypool, if in fact Deontay Johnson can't go in week 3 against the Bengals?
Well, obviously it elevates their production, and but the problem isn't really the wide receivers. I mean, the problem is the offensive line and Ben Roethlisberger, and he just isn't playing very well right now. Deontay Johnson clearly was the guy against the Raiders, and Claypool had a shot down the field too. But if he's not there, it really takes the quick speed element out of their offense. Smith-Schuster's a good player, but look at that, 6 for 41. That's about who he is. And so it'll squeeze the field a little bit, make it even tougher for Ben Roethlisberger. So that would be a damning blow. And not only that, it came on a meaningless play, which just frustrates the hell out of me. What the heck were they doing? I mean, you're down 9. There's 6 seconds or 7 seconds left, or whatever it is. Why bother?
Yeah, so senseless. And, hopefully it's not something that's going to be a problem for him, but had to be helped off the field there. And so we'll see what his absence, if he is going to miss any time, means for Juju, means for Claypool. I think we both agree that Juju is the one that benefits the most just based on the routes that he runs. Maybe it helps Najee Harris catch a few more passes, and Pat Freiermuth can be somebody who steps up also. James Washington, there's going to be a bunch of secondary players that certainly would benefit if Deontay Johnson misses time, but we want to see clearly Juju and Chase Claypool, the guys who are started, benefit the most. Heath, when we look at the Jarvis Landry situation, the Browns are really thin at wide receiver to begin with, because we don't know if Beckham will play in week 3 as they take on the Bears, but Landry almost certainly not going to play in week 3 after suffering the sprained MCL. So deeper leagues, let's assume Beckham has to sit one more time. What does this mean for Anthony Schwartz, who had a good week 1, Donovan Peoples-Jones, who they had a lot of positive reports about in training camp? Or is it going to be maybe just a very tight end heavy offense, as we saw now through 2 games, 3 tight ends, at least 5 targets, with Harrison Bryant having the better yardage day, Austin Hooper having a good game for whatever it was worth in week 2, and clearly David Njoku in week 1.
Well, we've seen from their matchup in week 3, the Bears have given up deep play after deep play after deep play. And so I do think someone like Anthony Schwartz, if he's fully healthy, he played this week, but he didn't play very much. I don't think he was healthy. He or Donovan Peoples-Jones could be one of those, 3 catches for 65 yards and a touchdown type guy. Nobody you actually feel good starting, though. I think it'd mostly be the running backs and the tight ends.
All right, so we'll see what happens there. If Beckham's able to play, that would certainly be the best case scenario for Baker Mayfield to have Beckham on the field after not playing the first 2 weeks of the season, coming back from last year's torn ACL. Pete in Jacksonville, Laviska Shenault left the game with a shoulder injury. We know he's had a hard time in his career staying healthy, going back to his days in college as well at Colorado. But tell me what you know about Shenault. I know you're tied into the Jaguars organization, so Marvin Jones, DJ Chark, these guys clearly benefit, but do you expect Laviska Shenault to miss some time after getting hurt in that loss against the Broncos?
Yeah, they're doing some tests today, but I think he'll miss maybe a week. When he leaves the game, he's a tough kid when he leaves the game, and he's had some injury problems. He's another one of those guys that's jinxed all the time. But keep an eye on Tyron Johnson. I mean, he started to get reps at the end of the game, actually added some speed to that offense. And when you watch them, and I watched them today on tape on offense, they lack any ability to separate, whether Chenault's on the field or Chark's on the field or whatever. It's a bad scheme right now. And adding a speed element to the offense might be a really good thing. And it took him a little while, I think, to get acclimated to the offense. But he's a guy to keep an eye on going forward, whether Shenault is on the field or not.
All right, so we'll see what happens with Shenault. We'll see what that means for Jones, what it means for Chark. Trevor Lawrence can't get any worse, so hopefully things will get better for him, but certainly not going to be an easy matchup as they take on the Cardinals in week number 3. We'd like to see if Shenault is out there. He had a good PPR game in week 1, clearly struggling with the shoulder injury in week number 2. If you have to replace Laviska Shenault, here are some receivers off the waiver wire that you could be looking at that could help you depending on their availability. I cheated a little bit. Typically, we go at 65%. I put Pittman on here at 66 because he did have a career game, so we'll see what that means for him. And the quarterback situation there for the Colts, if it is going to be Jacob Eason starting for potentially injured Carson Wentz. Tim Patrick stepped in for Jerry Jeudy, scored a touchdown. We showed you Darnell Mooney stats. Could benefit with Justin Fields. Sterling Shepard should be at 100%. I don't understand what's going on there. Elijah Moore, I think there's some big games coming. He just can't connect with Zach Wilson right now. Rondell Moore coming off a strong game. Henry Ruggs coming off a strong game. And you see a couple other guys here in Darius Slayton and KJ Osborne. So, again, Heath, your favorite guy on this list is who?
It's going to be Shepard for sure, and he almost feels like cheating because you're right. He should be rostered in 100% of leagues, and he should be probably started in 100% of leagues this week against the Falcons. Rondell Moore would be a close second.
All right, Pete, before we let you go, do a little peacocking here because Henry Ruggs is starting to look good. What do you think about the second-year receiver for the Raiders?
Yeah, he's starting to look like an NFL receiver, and everybody's quick to pound on these receivers and call them bust and everything else. Until you start being able to play without thinking so much, it's a tough position to play. You don't see a ton of coverages in college. He seems to be adjusting. He's going to be a big-time player. You can't teach speed, Jamey. It scares the hell out of defensive backs, and that's why he's going to be a productive player.
First game in his career with over 5 targets, so 7 targets leads to big production. Just throw the ball in his direction more, Derek Carr. Let's take some chances, see what happens. Could be a very good fantasy asset. Pete, thank you so much for joining us here on a Monday. We appreciate your time as always.
Want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis. No yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.